Life on planet Earth. From the giraffe to the koala to the chameleon. Life on planet Earth is incredibly complex and diverse. Now, it's hard to admire life on planet Earth without asking where the diversity and complexity came from. Not only is this a fascinating question, but it's a question that really matters too. You see, how life arose has to do with where we came from. Where we came from has everything to do with who we are. And who we are has everything to do with how we ought to live and where we're going. So not only is this a fascinating question as we investigate life on Earth, but it should matter to each and every one of us, to me, and to you, and to you, and to you. I'm not leaving anyone out. That's for all of y'all. So that's what we're going to ask. There are clear implications to life on planet Earth. Is life an accident? Is it purely the product of purely naturalistic processes? If that's the case, there's no rhyme or reason to it, no meaning or purpose. We just exist. That has clear implications on who we are, what life's about, and where we're going. However, if life is the product of intelligence, that also has clear implications on who we are. There's meaning, there's purpose, there's value to life. That says who we are, that says what life is about, and that says where we're going. So see why we should care about this? This is identity, this is purpose in life. And that's what we're going to investigate. How? By seeing how complex and diverse life arose on planet Earth. Let's dive in with some assumptions we can have. If life arose in the absence of intelligence, in other words, if life is truly the product of purely naturalistic processes, you'd expect it to rise slowly and simply. Why? If there's no guidance, it's literally like walking around in a dark cave. You can't see anything, and maybe at some point you'll stumble across something. Without guidance, where do you get complex life from? It's like working at a Rubik's Cube. Everything needs to be just right. And without guidance, without intelligence, that takes time. And without intelligence, it would start simple. So in this scenario, we expect a slow progression starting simply. Clear picture. However, if life is the product of intelligence, we expect a more deliberate act of creation, arising rapidly and already complex. That's the trademark of intelligent design. An intelligent creator can create something highly complex in a short amount of time. Very complex, different situations here. Slowly and simply, rapidly and complex. This isn't cloudy water, folks. This is common sense. We have a clear picture of life that we can look for. What do we find in the fossil record? Does life arise slowly and simply, or rapidly and complex? Well, here's the amazing part. Complexity arrives rapidly on the scene, with structures like spines, eyes, and organs. Here's some examples, some of the first complex animal life forms we find in the fossil record. Opabinia, Morella splendens, Amelocaris, and Lucigenia sparsa. These are not simple life forms, at any rate. We see spines, we see eyes, we see nervous systems and organs. This is highly complex life that we have to explain. Thus, we see life arrives rapidly and complex. But let's not wait there. It gets harder to explain. Life also arrives diverse. As explained by philosopher of science Stephen C. Meyer, if we divided history to a 24-hour clock, in just 1 minute of that 24-hour clock, we'd find roughly 20 of the roughly 27 major animal phylae arising in the fossil record, and thus on the planet, rapidly, spontaneously even. In a short little bit of time, we have the majority of major animal kinds arising rapidly. Thus, life arrives rapidly, complex, and diverse. What explains this? There are clear implications. As explained by geologist Sir Roderick B. Murchison, the earliest signs of living things, announcing as they do a high complexity of organization, entirely excludes the transmutation from lower to higher grades of being. If this is a purely naturalistic context, life must arise slowly. That's all that purely naturalistic processes can explain. But that's not the picture we find in the fossil record. No, we saw life arrives complex and diverse very rapidly. What do we do with that? We saw these complex organisms. To say these arose by naturalistic processes at this rate is like saying a Boeing 737 was created rapidly as the product of a tornado running through a junkyard. Who flew here to get to this conference? Yeah? Alright, a few of you. Now, seeing that airplane, how many of you think, this might just be the product of a natural process? No. That's high complex stuff. And it rose rapidly. That's not the product of a naturalistic process. Neither can this be. This arose rapidly, this complex, and very diverse. So, how does one hold to a naturalistic worldview and explain that data? They have to assume ancestral precursors exist. We saw that's not explainable with a naturalistic worldview. It's not. Richard Dawkins would say that's miracle, for lack of a better term. So one has to assume that those are not the first life forms. There were simpler ancestors that did exist. These are called artifact theories. One has to say, yes, against the available evidence, these ancestors did exist, and here's why we don't find them, and maybe shouldn't expect to find them. Excuses. But here are 4 of the main ones given that we'll walk through. First, some say these ancestors did exist, were fossilized, but due to tectonic movement at the time, these fossils were displaced into the sea, which is why we don't find them below the layer of fossils we do have. Now, after about a century of drilling in the sea, we've still not uncovered any of these fossils, leading most to abandon this theory entirely. It doesn't work. So this one doesn't work. Second, some say these ancestors were too small to be fossilized. Nonetheless, we even have fossilized algae, so size does not appear to be an issue. And even if it was, you'd expect to find what? Progression. It doesn't go small to large in one generation. You'd still expect to find some ancestors, but we don't. So this doesn't work either. Third, some say these organisms were too soft-bodied to be fossilized. Okay, that might sound reasonable. No. Once again, we fossilized algae. Softness doesn't appear to be an issue. As it turns out, 95% of our fossilized organisms from the Cambrian explosion are what? Soft-bodied, or at least thin skeleton. So once again, it does not appear to be an issue. And even if it was, what would we expect to find once again? Progression. It doesn't go soft to hard in one generation. We'd find some ancestors with some hard body parts, but we don't. So this one doesn't work either. And lastly, most interestingly, some would say that the sedimentation of the time was actually not ideal for fossil preservation. The Precambrian period was not ideal for fossil preservation, which is why we don't find fossilized ancestors. However, due to recent geological research, it actually turns out that the sedimentation of the Precambrian period was actually even more ideal for fossil preservation. What's that mean? We should expect to find even more fossilized organisms from the Precambrian period than from the Cambrian explosion itself. Thus, none of these excuses work. If these ancestors did exist and did walk the earth, we should find them. As it turns out, even greater abundance than that of the Cambrian explosion. This is a problem, and it's actually frustrating a lot of paleontologists looking for this. As explained by paleontologist Niles Eldredge, when we do see the introduction of evolutionary novelty, it usually shows up with a bang, and often with no firm evidence that the fossils did not evolve elsewhere. Evolution cannot forever be going on somewhere else. Yet that's how the fossil record has struck many a forlorn paleontologist, looking to learn something about evolution. You see, if this is the picture of life, if all life on this planet, with all its diversity, shares a common ancestor, this evolution has been happening everywhere throughout all of life's history. That's the picture of life we get. We should be finding that everywhere in the fossil record. But what's Niles Eldredge saying? Who, by the way, was an evolutionist. He's saying that we're not finding it anywhere. It's like it's always happening around another corner we haven't accessed yet. But he's saying if this is the picture of life, it can't always be happening out of our reach. We should find it, but we're not. So what are the implications? Well, here's a simplification of our Darwinian tree of life. We see major animal kinds with diversification within those kinds, but where they allegedly combine, we have a missing link. This common ancestor we haven't found in the fossil record. Now, we saw there's reason to think these links don't exist, never did. So what's the more accurate picture of life we get from the fossil record, holding on to what we actually do have? That would look more like this. Life arising rapidly, already complex and diverse, isolated within major kinds. What explains this? This is that Boeing 737 airplane, truly coming into existence rapidly. Not just that, it's like getting an airplane, getting a helicopter, getting a motorcycle, all this diversity. What explains this rapid arrival of complex and diverse life? It's inexplicable in natural terms. We've seen that. So what do we do with this? We saw that intelligence can create complexity and diversity in a very short amount of time. And many scientists are actually starting to lean towards this conclusion. As explained by molecular biologist Michael Behe, life on Earth at its most fundamental level, in its most critical components, is the product of intelligent activity. The conclusion of intelligent design flows naturally from the data itself. In other words, one isn't a religious fanatic for saying that the arrival of life points to an intelligent designer. That's all that makes sense. At the end of the day, all of us have to account for the arrival of complex and diverse life. What do you think explains it? How did those complex organisms get here? That's not a natural process. Only intelligence can do that. So as we look around at the beautiful, complex, and diverse life on this planet, we can be filled with wonder at the realization that it arose already complex and diverse. That points to an intelligent designer, which means life is not a mistake. There's a purpose to life. There's meaning in life. There's value in life. And what's that mean? You and I are not a mistake. You and I have purpose and meaning and value. Now, a logical next question is, who's this creator? What's this purpose? What's this value? What's life about? Where we're going? That's a logical next question. And that's the adventure we get to embark on, seeking who our creator is and what life's about. But now we see that that's something we actually can embark on. There are answers. So as we asked the question about how life arose on this planet, we saw that there are clear answers flowing from the data. And those answers have implications into our lives. So let this be the one takeaway from this presentation. Keep on asking these big questions. Seek the answers. There are answers. And let those answers shape your life.